Well, I am a diversity, equity, inclusion strategist, and I have a background in legal as a paralegal, legal project manager, and also as a community activist. And I've been rocking and rolling since your wonderful program that I began back in February.
Yeah,
And the journey has been pretty incredible for me.
yeah, yeah. When we got to know each other at the very beginning, your clarity call was done by one of my team members, as I recall,
Yes.
and usually it's in that discussion where we can really fine tune whether we can help someone or not, and frankly, whether there's something more that they could achieve in the marketplace or something different. Having gone through our workshop, you know that most of the time we're helping women up level in their current field and take advantage of what they've got in their, I call it the treasure chest of their education, experience, and expertise. And then
Yeah.
sometimes women want to make a little bit of a pivot or, kind of make a shift. And that's really what you got really clear on as we were going into the 12-week workshop. But let's talk a little bit about what was going on in your career. And again, we don't want to talk negatively about any of your employers or any of your past or current, but in general, what were you up against when we first got to work? What was going on?
Well, I just felt like I had become stagnant, that I wasn't maximizing my full potential. I wasn't growing, and the opportunity for growth was very limited.
Mhm.
And I had done some DEI work years ago. In fact, that's pretty much how I kind of began my career. I was working in politics at the time for an elected official. And as a result of my community work and outreach, I was drafted at like the tender age. I was in my very early 20s
Mhm.
and sent to the NYPD precincts in my borough and was, tasked with doing diversity or sensitivity training is what they called it back then. There
Right.
really was no
Yeah.
diversity positions. If there were, it was more crisis management. And as a result of some lawsuit that had taken place or, some egregious act, and they wanted to, show that, well, we had some sort of sensitivity training. So, we checked the box, that's done. And there definitely wasn't much money in it back then. It was something that I was very passionate about. It was near and dear to me. It was sort of as a result of my upbringing. My mother was very big on diversity and inclusion, like without even realizing it.
Yeah.
And so, like, that was always ingrained in me. And I, at that time struggled to, well, how can I make a living off of this? My mother, she had multiple sclerosis and leukemia. My father passed away in an auto accident. So it was, something that I really wanted to do, and even pursued my master's back in 2009. I got my master's in human resources management. And my goal was to sort of move into a D&I space. And even then, it just didn't seem doable because I had applied for positions back then because it was becoming more and more well known or well
Yeah.
recognized. And although I had experience and the now education or the degree to back it up, it was like, well, you would have to take a substantial pay cut in order to do it. And I'm like, well, I'm, the matriarch now of my family. Both parents are deceased. I'm raising, my younger brother and sister. How do I make this work? Because
Right.
I've got to keep a roof over everyone's heads. So
Yeah.
that was sort of how I ended up in legal, because I also knew from the work that I had done that a lot of DEI folks had come from like an employment background
Uh-huh.
experience, or they tended to be employment lawyers who they didn't want to practice anymore, and then they kind of shifted into that space. And I'm like, well, if they could do it, I can. I have employee relations experience, and
Yeah.
I have some
Yeah.
letters after my name. Like, why
Yeah.
not?
Yeah. Right. Right.
And we were actually, your workshop kind of highlighted or reignited my passion for that work. And we began pivoting towards that, like before the George Floyd incident even happened.
Mm-hmm.
So that was already like in progress. And it was like when it happened, it was like, oh, okay, yep, this is, time for me to get back involved in doing, what I'm passionate about.
Right. So often in the women that we work with who have advanced degrees, sometimes even just, an undergraduate degree or maybe a certification or something, have gotten that with some aspiration or ideas of something bigger, but what to do with it and how to leverage it and how to make those maneuvers and how to confidently step into something that maybe on paper looks like you don't have everything that you need to step into that.
Right.
Um, One of the things that, as you know, we do is help highlight what your value is and what you have done in a way that is authentic, yet more powerful than most women anyway, can kind of talk about or marshal up inside of themselves. Um, I want to elaborate on that just a little bit from your perspective, and then I want to go to the Lean In study and talk about that because it's relevant to I think what you're talking about, and that is I've got graduate education and nothing going on.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about what you were able to notice about your experience and what you bring to the table as we did the work together, and then I'll pop back to the study.
Well, when we started, I had kind of even suppressed that side of me because it felt like it was so long ago. It felt like it was so unattainable
Yeah.
that I just didn't envision it for myself anymore. And I at the same, token, I was like, well, where do I go next? Like, what, I don't understand how I got here and how I
Yeah.
move forward.
Right.
And so your program really helped me, get all of that into like connect the dots, so to speak,
Yeah.
and propel me forward.
Yeah.
And I've done some pretty incredible things, like looking back on it, like we were joking earlier, because I said in one of our calls, like if you had told me that XYZ was going to happen, back in February when we did the clarity call, I would have like hung up the phone, like, lady, like seriously, what gimmick is this?
You've got to be lying to me.
You got to be kidding me.
Yes. And one of the things I remember really enjoying was watching you connect with one of your iconic, I won't say mentor, but someone who you
Yeah,
really
thought leader. Uh-huh.
respected in the D&I space, a real powerful figure.
Yeah.
You were able to have a conversation with her, and you had to show up in a certain way, feeling worthy that was something that could happen,
Yes.
which was really exciting.
Yes, it was.
Yeah, we're going to get back to that in a second, but the this study. So, folks, you can get it at leanin.org. But here's the study right here. The state of Black women in corporate America, and if you just flip to the second page in, I mean, this is really all we need to hear. The workplace is worse for Black women. So their thesis statement jumps right off the page.
Mm-hmm.
And I know in working with you and dozens of other Black women in the work that I do, that not only the workplace is worse for Black women, but their experience in the workplace highlights their doubts. So you kind of backburnering your graduate degree because like, well, there's no way, there's no how. You had no evidence that someone like you was going to be able to advance in something that you didn't have experience, but you had an education.
Right.
So one of the things that this study highlights, and that is one of the most important aspects of a career going upward, is that Black women are significantly underrepresented in leadership roles. Because human beings are built and wired the way that we are, we will promote people who look like us. It's one of those unconscious biases that we're obviously all trying to get past, how the primitive brain is put together. VP roles, Black women make up 1.6% of VP roles in corporate America in these over 500 companies that they studied. And white men are 57%. 1.4% to 57%. Now, when you look at the population, Black women make up 7.4% of the US population. So just representing population statistics, that VP should be 7.4% of VPs are Black women, if it represents the population. It's not. And so white men make up 35% of the US population, and they occupy 57% of VP roles. I mean, that to me is just enough to choke you.
Yes.
And you and I both know the stark reality of what it's like to live in that type of environment.
Yes.
I have a good friend right now who's being replaced by a white male who has less experience than her.
I was going to say, with the pandemic right now, a lot of the stats don't take into consideration that when the layoffs, the restructurings, downsizing, so those numbers are probably even lower now than what they were at the time that study was written.
Yeah, yeah. We look at C-suite positions, so chief information, chief financial, chief executive, chief operating, chief human resource, any C-suite position, 1.4% Black women.
Mm-hmm.
Falls slightly down. 68% white men. So where we find, according to this study, and this is for all women in general as well, where we find the beginning of this is the first rung of advancement. And this study found that Black women ask for hiring and promotions as often as white men.
Yes.
Which is different than white women. White women fall behind in the percentage of asks. Black women don't. According to this study, Black women are asking. So one of the things that happens is that if that first rung doesn't include Black women, there's no advancement to VP level because there's that critical gap on the corporate ladder.
Yes.
And so that begins the problem. So with a master's degree, that first rung should be climbed and done. Boom, I come with a master's degree. I got that first level of climbing up the corporate ladder because I've earned that graduate level education to contribute to this organization. And that's where the break begins to happen. And of course it gets worse because it gets exacerbated as women are falling behind, in particular Black women are falling behind with each one. As I describe that, I know in diversity and inclusion, there's a bias toward having people of color in those roles.
Yes.
Of course, right? Of course. So there would be more opportunity for a Black woman with a master's degree, but yet you're facing either internally and or externally, well, you don't have the beginning of experience, so you'd have to start at the ground level.
Right.
So the support and access to advance is also underrepresented for Black women. So someone pulling you up and saying, nope, I know the work that Andrea does, come on over to this department. Most D&I departments are usually part of HR in a greater scheme of things, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So in a human resource department, someone wanting an opportunity with a master's degree, like you're going to get that opportunity. Okay. Right. So let's talk about that. So what went down on that wasn't your experience?
Well, I was very, I guess, naive when I got my master's, thinking that, yes, I got the degree and, I'm going to move forward. And I would go, well, the job market at that point, at that time, had really taken a nosedive. And I hadn't applied for, or had to apply for jobs, I would say, for a number of years. So even the job application process had totally changed. But I was getting interviews, I was getting in the door, and it would, I was either overqualified or not willing to take the drastic pay cut that I would have had to take. My professors had encouraged me to, do internships, which that was also challenging because I was already working full time to keep a roof over my family's head. and couldn't take a leave of absence for say 3 months in order to do an internship because it just wasn't feasible. It wasn't doable.
So having access though to the person who is going to pull you up and say, new graduate degree, come on. What you're saying is you were actually dismissed with that credential and sorry, you got to start at the bottom.
Yes.
And that's not true for someone who carries a graduate degree in their hand. That's the whole point of a graduate degree. Okay? So your experience is basically dismissing your education and dismissing the fact that someone shoulda, woulda, coulda likely pulled you up saying, oh, look, qualified, talented, educated, boom. And that didn't happen. One of the things that this study exposes, which again, you know, because you experienced it and you're telling me about this, Black women are less likely to interact with senior leaders. So you didn't have access to senior leaders. You didn't have interaction to senior leaders. No one knew what Andrea Payne brought to the table that was outside of your existing job.
Correct.
And so the exposure in an organization to what usually lifts people up and, hey, Joe's really good at this. Hey, Frank, why don't you promote Joe? So that, hey, Andrea's really good at this. Why don't you promote Andrea into this? That dialogue and exposure is just not there. And so the opportunities get missed. The graduate degree gets hung on the wall. And here you are basically kind of like doing the job as a paralegal, wanting something different and more. You've got everything except the route to get there.
Right. The access and the support.
That's right. So here's a little quote out of the study in one of these little like bubble boxes here. In a survey of US law firm employees, 62% of women of color with some level of mentorship said that the lack of an influential mentor was a barrier to their advancement. Only 30% of white men said the same. So it's twice the amount of not having that mentor, someone who's going to pull you ahead for Black women as it is to white men. Black women face more day-to-day discrimination at work. You're like, no kidding.
I did my graduate thesis on that. I did my graduate thesis on disparity in treatment in law firms.
Yeah. You know what this study also points out? That Black women are twice as often, but actually 3 times as often to be having their competence questioned than white men.
Oh, yes.
And 12% more than white women. And being disrespected, being mistaken for someone at a much lower level.
Yes.
Hearing demeaning remarks about you or people like you.
Mm-hmm.
Hearing others surprised at your language skills or other abilities.
I had a doubt.
Like you can't talk about yourself or your life outside work.
Yeah.
I know, this is like a mirror. Look, I saw this study. I think it was may have been a LinkedIn post about it, and I popped through there as soon as I possibly could because it's my job and my passion to elevate and up-level women. And as I got into this work and really saw firsthand what Black women and Indian women and Hispanic women, we've got a powerful Hispanic woman in our Leadership Academy and in some of our accelerator programs, and she's facing very similar stuff. Now, she's a very thick accent, which is another thing that goes against how people are treated in the workplace. So let's talk a little bit about diversity and inclusion and how we as human beings need to open ourselves up to people who not only look different, maybe talk a little bit differently, accents in other cultures. Indian women, you know, there's a couple of Indian women who are in some of our power circles, if you will, and their ability to be able to communicate and translate their competency, their leadership, their abilities, et cetera, is a little bit challenging for them.
Yes.
So what has to happen, in my view, I'm not a D&I expert, but I see these things playing out all the time, is that white people, white men who are really the power base of this country anyway, and globally really in many areas, have to be appreciative and willing to take their biases off the table and see everyone for what they bring to the table. What are some of the things that you would like to advance or advocate for that you see that would be some of the first layer of that as a diversity and inclusion consultant that you are becoming to be?
Well, one of the things I noticed in doing my graduate research, and even in general in throughout my many years of work, is that a lot of work happens unofficially or officially at cocktail hour. Like you get invited to happy hour, and some people may not drink, whether for religious reasons or, they may have had an alcoholism issue, and that's usually not factored in it. But, it's like if you don't go, then you miss out. And even if you do show up in those spaces, if you're a woman of color and you're there, but no one talks to you, like you're sitting like in the corner, or you're trying to navigate your way into conversations, but you're dismissed because of what you look like. That's an obstacle. So one of the thought leaders I follow was saying that diversity and inclusion is more like having a party and not being asked to dance.
Mm-hmm.
And the goal for inclusion is to get everybody on the floor dancing. And that's what we need to move forward, and strive for.
Right, right. When you're talking about the after hours or after work things, and how some of the casualness of relationships or conversations that can happen when that space is more relaxed, it does advance people's opinions of other people, or it diminishes them.
Right.
And so if you come into that scenario already feeling like an outsider, your own personal emotional memories of not being invited, not being accepted, not being respected is going to be the lead of how you're bringing yourself into those scenarios.
Yes.
So let's talk a little bit about where you've come internally with how you feel about yourself and your value, and the difference between when we started working together and where you are now. And I might highlight some of the things that have happened. If you don't do that, I'm going to do that. So, so just to preface, those of you who don't know our work in the Kick-Ass Workshop, one of the things that we help our ladies do is to be comfortable bragging, because tooting your own horn and knowing your value and being able to articulate it in a way that other people can say, oh, you know that? Oh, you do that? Oh, that's great, is a really important part of the work that we do. So knock it out of the park here, Andrea. Give us a few brags about who you've become and what you have been able to execute and experience because of that.
Okay. Well, first, the main one was shortly after I finished the workshop, I was asked, just got an email from one of my legislators, and he was newly elected, and he was seeking community support for a bill on diversity in terms of banning discrimination against those that have natural hairstyles, braided hairstyles, and wear religious garments. And I was like, sure, like, like this is right up my alley. Let me respond. And I just figured if I sent off this email saying, yes, I support it and here's why, like that was done. Like, okay, cool. Like I supported it. And then I got a call saying, like, would you be available to address the county legislature on such and such date and such? And I'm like, what? And I'm like, okay. Like me? So I did. I showed up.
Yeah.
And there were, a few other speakers ahead of me. I was the last person to speak, but I noticed, because they did it on a Zoom platform since everything was closed, And I'm noticing, I said, well, they didn't ask anybody any other questions. Like, I can't wait for them to finish so I could go in and have dinner, because we were hanging on the phone for like, it was a while. And it was getting late. And I was like, oh, I'm tired. I'm hungry. I can't wait to, get my little 3 minutes and I'm done.
Yeah.
But then they started asking all of these follow-up questions. And I'm like, you didn't ask any of these other people any questions. And I'm like, why are they asking me? And at one point I felt like I was being grilled, but I toughed it out. Like, I was answering the questions, and they just seemed to be very engaged in what I was saying. And I was just like, okay, like, I really hope this bill passes. Like, if they're asking me all of these questions. And the bill did end up passing. And I wound up being contacted like a month later by a news reporter who's like, yeah, the bill is passing tomorrow, and we just wanted to get your comments. And I'm like, whoa. And then I was invited to a press conference last month recognizing my efforts as a community leader, and the counties had passed several other diversity bills, like in light of that one
Mm-hmm.
and the support of it. And I was asked to consider at some point joining a task force that's being formed in my area on diversity and inclusion. So that's pretty exciting.
Mm-hmm. And all the while, there's this graduate degree on your wall and a desire in your heart to want to participate in this dialogue and change the world in that vein. And here it comes.
Yeah.
Not in the way you expected it.
No.
But you're a thought leader without really doing that as a profession, and it's been on your heart, and you've been doing stuff and you've been wanting it, and now all of a sudden you're being seen as a thought leader in your community. And one of the other fun things was you speaking to an iconic person in that D&I space while you were in the workshop. Yeah. And that was a whole lot of fun to kind of tee you up to do that. Who was Andrea Payne before she was able to do that stuff?
I was a worker bee. I just kind of kept my head down and figured, oh, if I work really hard, people will recognize that, and my efforts will be recognized and celebrated, and that's not how that works.
It is not how that works at all. It's one of the biggest common lies about career, isn't it?
Yeah.
What did you realize that you had to be?
Oh, you have to be bold. You have to make moves, power moves, and you've really got to. You've got to, first of all, lift your soul up. You've got to, like how your podcast, your radio show says, bring your soul to work. You've really got to do that, because if you don't have any soul in it, and in the D&I space or the DEI space, it's actually very challenging. Like there's a lot of burnout that people don't talk about. You have to practice a lot of self-care. So this, the format in which your workshop is presented was very helpful with that, because I had gotten very neglectful regarding self-care.
Yeah.
And realized, now, especially with everything going on and DEI leaders are in such demand, that they're being overburdened, overworked, and some of them are burning out very quickly. And it's like, okay, well, now I know what I need to do to stay up there. And I know when to take breaks when I need to, and just recharge.
Right. When you're used to having to grind it out, it's easy to lose touch with what you need as a person, as a human being, to be healthy and vibrant and thriving. So grinding it out becomes the habit, and you just work and work and work, or prove and prove and prove. And you hope one day that golden brass ring will show up, and you'll be like, oh, finally, all the hard work. But what you're saying is that exhaustion and grinding it out and pedal to the metal, hoping someone will notice, A, it doesn't work, and B, it just saps all of the best of you out.
Correct.
And now you're depleted trying to get something that you haven't been able to get And all the ways that you were trying to get it are actually not the true ways to get it.
Right.
It's by having a self-confidence and an inner ability to be able to promote yourself. It's
Yeah.
about finding allegiances and alliances that you can engage, that know who you are and will help advance you.
Mm-hmm.
It's about staying motivated for what you believe you can do and want to do, and not let the obstacles defeat you. And one of the things that this lead-in study noticed is that Black women want to lead, and they are motivated to improve their workplaces.
Yes.
So I think the future is bright, not only for you, but also because of you. Because you become a role model for other Black women, for other women. You become a role model for all people, stepping into your power and being willing to speak your truth and stand in that and not feel the overwhelming obstacles taking over. You are taking over you. And that's what I love about your journey, is that you have chosen you. Here's who I am. Here's who I want to be. Here's who I am going to be in this world. And having that boldness not to be stopped. Now, we haven't talked about one thing that stops a lot of Black women from being bold. And that's being typecast as an angry Black woman.
Oh, yeah.
And I know, just as a woman, being labeled as a bitch if you take charge of something is enough to stop most women from taking charge of things. We don't want to be labeled. We don't want to be seen as something that we're not. And we don't want to be misunderstood that being in our power has this negative label. So how are you finding yourself, Andrea, to step into your power without letting that silent critic win? Tell me about that.
I've been following all of the self-care tips that your wonderful workshop has gotten me on track with. And I find that I'm vibrating at a much higher and different level than I was several months ago. For example, I was, in my personal life, I was dealing with a very protracted litigation that was going on. And it had depleted me. I felt so defeated and crushed. And it sort of came to an end this year. And it didn't come in to the end that I had expected or I had hoped for. But it was like, oh, okay, well, that's it then, you know.
You're like, I'm fighting for that, and that's that, huh? Okay.
And I remember,
climax, huh?
Yeah, I remember looking at the decision, and I'm going like, oh, that's it. And then I said to myself, who have I become? Because like the old Andrea would have been like furious, like, like she. But it was just like, oh, that's it. Okay. Well, it's over with. I can move on to other things.
You decided to take better care of your body.
Yeah.
You are prioritizing yourself. And the other cool little gem that you shared with me is that the community of graduates of the workshop, that has been a rich experience for you with other kick-ass women who are all helping each other gain different types of advantages and networking and that sort of thing. And there's been an opportunity put for you to really participate in an official level in what you love to do. If you were to talk to either yourself a couple of years ago or a woman who was in your shoes in February, what would you say?
Yeah, I would definitely tell them to sign up for this workshop. Even my friends have noticed a big difference. Like those close to me, they're like whatever, like whoever this lady is or whatever, like you've been doing for the past several months, like I see a change in you, and I'm like, okay.
Yeah. You definitely are lighter, brighter, happier, You're younger. I mean, I think we've discovered the fountain of youth. What do you think? Uh,
Yeah.
Bringing your
And I
soul
am
back to life.
lighter. I lost
Yeah, right.
23 pounds.
Boom. Not through suffering, though.
No.
Just from saying, you know what, this is my body and this is what my choice is going to be and this is what I'm going to
Yeah.
do. Yeah. You know, when you feel good about yourself, all of the things that we as human beings do to soothe our pain begin to melt away and we don't need them anymore.
Hmm.
And as most human beings know, you know, food is one of the easiest ways to soothe our pain.
Yeah.
And so when you're not in pain, when you're not needing that level of soothing because you've done the soul work and you're hanging out in an expression of your divinity, there isn't that level of, well, I need to soothe this. Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And that's one of the most beautiful things. You know, you may not know this, but there's been women who've quit smoking, been able to get off like blood pressure meds, anti-anxiety meds. They're sleeping better. Relationships that are good get better. Relationships that are bad get tossed out
Oh,
the
yeah.
door. I think you had a good to great situation with the relationship as well. And so all of the things that are empowering and feel good get better. And all of the things that were disempowering and holding you back begin to get out of your zone, don't they?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. What's next for Andrea Payne?
Well, I've made some wonderful connections in our group, and one of those connections has invited me to do some DEI work with one of the organizations that she's running, and it's moving and at a fast pace.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. Keep your eye on the prize because you're definitely worthy of contributing at a very high level, Andrea. And anyone watching this interview has seen a bright, shiny, powerful, charismatic, intelligent, awesome woman who's going to make a bigger and bigger difference in the world as you continue to breathe each day. You're really a shining star on the planet. And I am
Thank you.
delighted to have witnessed you coming into that. It's been a real pleasure to watch that. And I also really thank you from the bottom of my heart for participating in this important dialogue about Black women's careers matter. They do for all of us, and they do for you individually. So I appreciate you advocating for yourself, for your sisterhood, and for the globe to do a better job at advancing Black women in their careers and in the workplace. It's going to make us all better. So thank you very much for the contribution today and the contributions that you are making every single day by being an awesome version of you. Been really awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Mo.
Yeah. For those of you who want to get started with the journey that Andrea just described and where she's been going, it starts with a complimentary career clarity call. There we talk about what's going on, what's holding you back, and what you really want to do. And if we feel that we can help you advance, we will help do that in our 12-week kick-ass workshop. It does require some work, does it not, Andrea?
Oh, yeah. It's a lot of work, but it's worth it. It's self-work.
Yes.
Inner
absolutely.
work.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So we have a pleasure helping lift hundreds of women every year, and really the shining examples of Andrea and the other women you'll hear about this week really touches my heart because their souls are now contributing to the world in a way that was always meant to be. Thank you again, Andrea. I really appreciate you sharing your story and being with me here today. It's always a pleasure to connect with you.
Thanks, Mo.
All right. Folks, mofaul.com/strategy is the way you get that complimentary career clarity call. We'll see you next time. Motivational Monday. This is Coach Mo Faul.